And he said, I'm not going to buy it. And here's why. You're either born with the resilience or you're not.
It's Wednesday, and the window is open. In this extended conversation, Andrew Shatte and Dr. Karla explore resilience, optimism, and what helps us move forward.
If we were to ask the people who are tuning into this, when was the last time that you were overwhelmed with frustration? They'd probably say, as soon as Andrew started talking, right?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
this morning, right?
Right, right. But if I were to say to them, when was the last time you were overwhelmed with contentment? There's a
Oh,
sense in which the question itself doesn't even really make sense to us. We don't get overwhelmed by contentment. We sort of dabble in it. But I
yeah,
can,
or appreciate it, right?
we appreciate it, but do we really dive into it? Do we really entertain it in our hearts and our minds the way we do frustration? For me, I don't think we do. And yet if we pull these things apart, we realize that frustration is an emotion that pops when we have thoughts that we don't have the resources we need. And contentment is an emotion that pops when we have thoughts that we do have the resources we need. There's nothing inherently superior to frustration except that our brains make it so. So we need to understand that we can't treat the good emotions, the pride, the joy, the happiness, the contentment, the love, as if it were an infinite resource, and we'll pay attention to that later. We have to treat it as if it were an oasis in a desert. And if you stumbled across an oasis while trekking through a desert, you're not going to nibble on a date, put your toe in the water, have a little sip and move on, which is how we kind of treat the positive emotions. We dabble in them and then we move on. We need to sort of throw ourselves into that water, really replenish ourselves, and then go back out. We need to spend as much time and as much energy on the positive as we do on the negative. Right now, I don't believe most of us are doing that.
And is that what really ties it into the resilience factor?
I think resilience is, man, I've been asked this sort of question for 34 years now, and I can say um, categorically that I didn't have an answer to these for the longest time. And we were running programs in resilience, calling them resilience programs for 5 good years between 1992 and 1997. And then one day I was in a meeting with a CEO of a Fortune 1000, shall remain nameless, and um, we were pitching our program. We have a program that builds resilience in employees.
Okay.
And he said, I'm not going to buy it. And here's why. You're either born with the resilience or you're not.
Hmm.
And I didn't have an answer. He said, well, if you're not just born with it, then what is it that you're telling me you develop over time? And I didn't have an answer to that either. So we went away and we started to do the research. What exactly is resilience? Because up until then, whatever there was as a field of resilience didn't have that answer either. My colleagues and I were just graduate students at the time. We were going out to people and saying, hey, we just realized we don't know what resilience is. What is it? And people were saying, it's bouncing back, it's steering
That's
through, it's
exactly what came to
overcoming.
my mind. The ability to
Right.
bounce back. Yeah.
And they're all good answers, except if you think about it, it's what resilient people do. It's not what resilience is. And if you want to build a training model, you have to do better than bouncing back. I don't know how to train people to bounce back unless I know what's involved in that, right? So when we did that work and did the analysis, we found it was made up of 7 basic things. The ability to stay calm under pressure, to control our behaviors, to react in maladaptive ways, to do good problem solving, look at all the causes, work out what we can and cannot control, and channel our energies towards what we can, to bank institutional knowledge in the form of self efficacy and self confidence that's genuinely based on previous good problem solving, to have realistic optimism, not too much, not too little, just right, to develop empathy so that we can buoy each other when times are tough. It's a really important part of the fact that we're social animals. And then finally, what we did call back then reaching out, but I think is better characterized as growth mindset. that willingness and ability to take on opportunities and challenges. Now, those seven we validated for the last 30 years and built assessments around it, built competency models around it, built training around it. And my best answer for what is resilience is still to resort to those seven. And I think that a lot of the things that we're talking about and talked about so far, and you and I, we go way back. We go back 20 years. So we've had these conversations a lot over time. And all the kinds of things that we've talked about over time, I think, ultimately have their footing in those seven.
Yeah. And let's touch on one of them because I think it's such an important point to make about optimism. And there is such a thing as like toxic optimism. When people say, just put your chin up, or put on a smile, and or they come in so overly cheery that you're just like, oh. Tell me a little
Com-
bit about that. What do you do in that situation?
Completely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, completely. I mean, literally millions of dollars have been spent establishing that pessimists don't do well, which, may not be the most frugal use of our tax dollar, right? Because that's pretty clear. But it took longer to convince people that over-optimists don't do well either. And a lot of my colleagues and I out of the University of Pennsylvania, most of the work of my colleagues on this one has been really to show that that's true. And there was one fabulous study that was done by a colleague of mine, Jane Gillum, where she looked at cumulative GPA at the University of Pennsylvania across the 4 years of college. And she'd previously also measured all of the participants' levels of optimism with really well validated, trusted measurements. And what she found was kind of like an inverted J curve in that the more optimistic you were, the better your GPA until you reached an inflection point, and then the GPA dropped beyond a certain level of optimism.
Interesting.
And and the story that she was able to create from the data was if you're really pessimistic and you experience some sort of academic setback in your freshman year, then you say, I guess this is just because I'm not smart enough to be here. I've met my match. I'm just going to continue to muddle through with B's and C's and D's, and I'll have a mediocre degree, but that's my lot. And you don't do anything to take control and make it better. And those people who are over optimists, they preserve their optimism by externalizing. This professor's exams were just too hard. I didn't study hard enough for this test, and but that's okay. I'll do it again in the future. But they don't. They put it down to bad luck. And so they don't feel motivated to improve anything in themselves either. It's the people who sit there in that middle piece
Yeah.
who say, there's probably some limits to my abilities. They're going to reflect in my grades. I'm up against a really bunch of really smart kids now. But there are other things that I can improve, like my study habits and surrounding myself with a good study group, maybe getting a tutor, maybe attending classes. How about that one? Taking better notes, prepping a little bit more ahead of time. So they
Not
take
doing the TikTok videos when you're supposed to be doing
not
that.
doing a TikTok video. I'm happy to say my daughter found her way to college, so that's all good. But yeah, so I do, but you're right, you're so right about the toxic optimism. And in fact, we have a phrase for it. We call it the optimism gap. And here's what we find. We find that optimism is the sort of competency that tends to lead you to believe that you have the capacity to crack any nut, solve any problem. And so you do become the office problem solver and you get stuff done and you come to the attention of other people. And you're typically ambitious and motivated because why not? You've got things to say and do, and you do well. And so you tend to get promoted. So what we see is that pessimists like me tend to languish more towards the bottom of the pyramid, and optimists tend to get promoted. So the consequence is you've got this gap. It's the